I'm really excited to introduce our speaker. So for today's keynote, we have Liane Hornsey. Liane Hornsey is the Executive Vice President and Chief People Officer for Palo Alto Networks. She joined there in September 2018, and Liane had previously served as Chief People Officer at Uber Technologies, Inc., where she helped transform the culture during a period of significant turbulence. Liane serves on the board of Build, a nonprofit organization that provides real-world entrepreneurial experience to empower youth from under-resourced communities to excel in education, lead their communities, and succeed professionally. She's going to be in conversation with our own amazing Director of Marketing and Community, Lauren Haggerty. Lauren is the pioneer of our beloved Chat and Learn program and our fearless leader. I cannot wait to listen in on this conversation. I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Meg, and thank you to everyone who's tuning in today and who's tuned in all week. We are so excited to be here with you live on our third day of the summit. And Liane, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to dive in to not only your career and what drives you to, do the work that you do, but some of the successes and advice you have for everyone online. So thanks for being here.
It's great to be here. I love doing things like this.
Awesome. Well, let's kick off the session by learning just a little more about you, and particularly what inspired you to start your career in HR. And as Meg alluded to, you have a really robust career. So I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to be extraordinarily honest and like most HR professionals, tell you the truth, which is I had no intention of starting off in HR whatsoever. Actually, I've been a Chief People Officer 5 times now, and I adore it. I love the role, but I actually started off in sales, and I worked in marketing, and I worked in strategy, and I worked in customer service. And then actually what happened in a nutshell is the CEO I was working for said to me, "Hey, Liane, I think you're great, but you're far too harsh and you're far too directive and you're far too difficult to work with." And I went, "Oh, thanks for the feedback." And he said, "And I want you to take on HR," at which point I nearly kicked him. I was like, "You can't do that for me. I'm a profit responsible person. I love my job." And he said, "No, I think it will round you." And so I did what he asked because he was a mentor and I really, really valued him. And about 9 months later, I realized I loved this job. And I loved this job because it brought out different behaviors, different needs, different opportunities for me to be supportive of people and to work in a very different way. And I've stayed in HR, even though I didn't have to stay in HR, for a very long time now. And actually, I adore it. I literally adore it. So it was not a plan. I can't pretend it was a plan. And I guess there is some learning there. One of the things that I say to my own kids who are very early in career is be very careful about planning. Be very careful about planning your career because opportunities come from everywhere that you will not have thought of. I had no thoughts of going into HR, like none. And then suddenly I found a path that has made me a better person, I believe, and actually played to some skills that I thought I had that were latent. So, I talk to a lot of early in career people about they have this career plan and they have to do this. And I'm like, whoa, go with the flow a bit and learn to go with the flow and maybe you'll learn more.
I mean, that's so in tune with the summit theme, mid-career pivots and early career connections. I went to school for genetics and here I am leading a marketing team. So I totally resonate with what you're saying. Kind of have to just trust the path that's laid before you. Take the road less traveled, which is incredible. And we're going to dive into a lot of that stuff and kind of what's gotten you to the success that you're seeing today, which I think is really fascinating. And, to kind of in tune with that, you've come from so many different Fortune 500 companies, which is incredible. What is one commonality you've seen in all of these companies and how they hire and retain top talent?
Yeah, I think there really is, there's so much learning. It's really hard to condense. But if I had to give you the truthful elevator pitch, and I've worked for companies that haven't been able to hire, well, no, I've worked for companies that have all been able to hire top talent, but not actually retain top talent. And the hiring and the retention are different. Hiring is all about your brand, all about what you stand for as an employer. Retaining is genuinely, truthfully, as an elevator pitch, it's all about caring. If you care about each individual, if you genuinely do, you will retain your people. Because if you care, you will deeply dive into what makes each individual that works for you tick. What do they need? How do you support them? How do you build them in their career? And one of the things that I feel really strongly about is too many companies see people as cohorts. They sort of say, you know, all people who graduated in need to go through the same program. It's just nonsense. It's just total nonsense, because we are all different individuals with different needs. And the more a company can really drill down to see that you are different to me and I'm different to that person, and that I want something different and I need something different to you, the more successful a company will be at retention. Now, a lot of people find that a tall order. But, you know, my response is, why? When you're in your home life, when you're in your family, you take the time to really care about the people around you, your partner, your kids, your parents, your friends. Why on earth don't you do that in the workplace? What is it that happens to people when they walk through the metaphoric office door and they become jerks? We just need to understand that people are individual and care about them as individuals. I honestly think that is the simple elevator pitch.
It's fabulous. And I watched the interview that you did about your time at Google and how you kind of became this people first, and not that you became a more caring individual, but took that approach. Yeah. To become just this incredible leader. And I also thought it was fascinating when you mentioned that it took you 15 years to become a good manager. By all means, I have not had 15 years managing people. So it gave me kind of a pause in thinking about my own career and wow, I have ways to go. But I think that's really, humbling. And, I appreciated that. And especially that you uncovered that your success depended on that success of your team. And as you said, I think a lot of us are very selfish in our careers, and we're just thinking about ourselves. And as leaders, how do we, get to the next level? And, I think that has a lot to do with micromanaging and not, delegating properly. So there's a lot to unpack here. But specifically, how can individual contributors take that step back and focus on building up those teams, supporting their growth, and making sure that holistically the organization as a whole is growing? How do we do that? How do we start?
It's not rocket science. I've worked for a very long time, and I've actually learned simple truths. When many of us come to work, and I hope this resonates with each and every one of you, we want to impress. We want our boss to think that we're great. And often when we're in that situation anywhere in life, we act in a me way. Me, Liane, right? Because I want to impress my boss. It's about me, Liane. It is absolutely ridiculous, because the way that I can impress my boss, and this is the truth, is by the delivery that comes from a total team, by showing that I genuinely care about others and that we really believing that we're stronger together. And it is so bizarre that our own ambition, actually sometimes our lack of self-esteem and our insecurity drives us to put ourselves first and become controlling. If we can let go of that insecurity, and I've felt it, I really understand it. And even now, today, I feel it. Sometimes I want to say, actually, that was me. It wasn't him, it was me. But, I truly believe that if we show that we collaborate with others and that we care about others, and we can honestly say it's all about all of us, we actually all benefit. I have noticed that I am most successful when I drop the me word. It's just true. And it's hard to believe, because our natural instinct is me, 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 me. It is. And that's not arrogance. It's often insecurity, right? It is not arrogance. It's not that people are bad people. But when we can drop it, we are more successful. And, you know, I say to my kids, and I allude to my kids a lot because I would never lie to my kids. You know, if I tell my kids, it's the truth. If you want to be really successful in your career, just be bloody kind. Be kind to everyone around you. Be supportive of those around you, because kindness gets paid back so many times. Controlling, politics, acting out of fear can also get paid back, but not in a positive way. And the more, you know, I don't want to make this a gender issue, but I actually do feel that women understand this intuitively more than sometimes their male counterparts. And that as women, we can bring that to organizations, and it's a unique value add that we have that will help ourselves and our organizations.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's really powerful. And, you know, actually something that nicely ties into this next question. As we go up the hierarchy, and, you know, not to, you know, hyper focus on gender, but, you know, we are trying to reach more of a gender parity in these leadership levels. You know, the statistics show that there are not women in these higher level positions. So how can we make our managers or empower these people in middle management positions throughout organizations, whether you're, you know, have one level of middle management or multiple? How can we empower them to be great leaders? Are there specific steps that we can take? I love the phrase lift while we climb, but how do we support these middle managers?
I think it's exactly the right question to ask. So many people talk to me about, or they say, change has to come from the top. Actually, I find that somewhat, to be honest, I find it a cop-out. I find it's like people say, I'm not going to be bothered because it's all about them. You know, change doesn't come from the top. Change is reinforced by the top and led from the top, but change happens in the middle. I have seen this time and time and time again. I work with a leadership team that is completely committed to diversity, completely committed. I work to a CEO who bleeds diversity naturally from his heart and his head, but really from his heart. I don't have to sell. It's the middle where I have to sell. And again, I actually think that it all comes down, in essence, I'm making this very simple because it is not simple. It comes down to a few simple steps. One, understanding, helping people understand their innate biases without blame. There is not a person alive who doesn't have some sort of bias. You know, I have taken many tests about my own biases, and I actually found about 10 years ago that I didn't think women could code. And I was like, that's just nonsense. Of course I believe women can code. But actually, it's because I didn't have role models around me of women who could code. You know, I'm a humanities grad. All I know is humanities. And I've faced my own biases. And I think if we can help people understand that biases happen and aren't necessarily evil, then that they are just about insecurity and nurture and nature. Once you can help people understand that biases are just there and are discussable, and then you make the whole issue of diversity discussable. If we have biases, if we believe X about Y, how do we bring that out, make it discussable, and then as a team get to the place where we realize that our biases were holding us back? The other thing that the next step, of course, is the data around diverse teams. It is everywhere. You know, you don't have to sort of Google much to find diverse teams are more successful. You can do that also within your own organizations. I can show diverse teams are very, very successful, right? So let people face their own biases in a non-blame way. Blame is the absolute epitome of what goes wrong here. You've got to make stuff discussable. You've then got to use the data. And then I do use a little bit of the stick rather than the carrot. I do make sure that at our hiring gates, we have diverse candidates. I do make sure that we are putting 2 diverse candidates through for every role. And you do have to control the gate, and you do have to have a little bit of a stick to make sure that that transition happens. And then actually, I find the stick, the non-blame, the data, and the experiential learning over time, you get there.
I love that. It's a nice mix of all the things that people talk about through the trajectory of hiring diverse talent. We have a great question from Eve in the chat, and I want to encourage the audience to continue submitting questions. We'll get to as many as we can throughout the session and more so at the end, but Eve's question really nicely ties into your answer. So they want to know, leading with wisdom is intrinsic to sustainability and growth. When will the profit model reflect this?
I'm not sure I understand. Do you mean the profit model for the organization? So when will organizations reflect diversity and sustainability in their goals? Is that the question? Just to make sure I understand.
Yeah, maybe Eve, you can elaborate a little bit. That's kind of how I took it. But we can see if she has a follow-up or they have a follow-up. And in the meantime, maybe
Should I answer it that way in the meantime?
Yeah, let's answer it that way.
Yeah. I'm going to answer the question believing that I understand what it means, but I could be wrong. I think the question is around, when will organizations take this seriously and reflect it in their profitability and their goals? I think that's happening more and more. I actually spoke at an analyst day last week, and it was the first time in my career, which has been very long, that I spoke at an analyst day. And it was because we realized that it was super critical at a financial level and at a company level to talk about our ESG strategy, to talk about sustainability, to talk about diversity, to talk about our employees, because more and more investors are absolutely demanding that. More and more investors are saying, we want to know, what are you doing for the environment? What are you doing for your people? What are you doing for diversity? The questions are coming. And I do think that is forcing a change. I also think that you see regulation in certain states and certain countries around diversity mix of boards. So I actually think it's changing faster than I imagined it would. And, you know, for me to be part of an analyst day talking about the importance of people, the importance of the environment, the importance of diversity it was a seminal moment for me, because usually it's just about blooming numbers and profitability and billings and all that stuff that we all understand every single year. So it's coming. I really think it's coming. And I think a lot of the VCs and a lot of the PE companies are doing a very good job in the government holding companies more and more accountable. So it's changing. I really believe that.
It's incredible. And very exciting to be part of this movement.
Super exciting.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about Palo Alto Networks and what they're doing to support the career development of their employees. And then we'll get into employee motivation. But how are they supporting the career development?
Yeah, I think this is it's a fundamental question. You know, the human condition is that we need to learn and grow. I don't care what anyone tells me. I know that to be true. We all need to learn and grow. The minute we feel that we're standing still, it's painful. So we take learning super seriously. Now, I'm afraid this might be a little bit of a long answer, so bear with me. One of the things that we realized when the pandemic hit was that we smashed a paradigm. I'm sure you've all experienced that your companies have gone, good gracious, we had to send everybody home. And my goodness, we lost no productivity. We lost some well-being for sure. This was very hard on our people, but we lost no productivity. And we realized something really fundamental, and shame on any company that hasn't. We realized we did not need to control our people. And we realized that people could sit at home amongst really difficult circumstances and still be productive and still do their work and still be wonderful people. And so we said if we can smash that paradigm of control, let's smash some more. Let's see what paradigms we've learned over the last 50 years that actually are archaic. And we smashed the paradigm of cohort learning. So, you know, from the age of 4, we all learn in cohorts. You go into a class and you learn at the same rate with a little bit of change around the edges. It's bonkers. The reason we have done that is that we have not had the technology for individual learning at individual pace and choice. It's because we've had to. With the technology we have today, we are able to enable people to learn at their own pace, the learning that they want. So, for example, at Palo Alto Networks, and I am so proud about this. I am so proud of it. So I'm going to wax lyrical. we now have a system where every single employee can go into that system and answer some questions about their learning needs. It's private to them. Their manager doesn't see it. Nobody sees it. I can go in and say, Liane Hornsey, I feel pretty nervous when I have to present to Power to Fly. Help me. Or I could go in and say whatever. And through AI, you get served some learning, through the mechanisms in the back that is personal to you. And then you can go on your own learning journey. And you can share that with your manager if you want. You can share it with your mentor or your buddy if you want. But it's for you, Liane, or it's for you, Lauren. It's not for a cohort. Now, you're going to have some cohort learning, around biases and around equaling the playing field on diversity or maybe product knowledge. But individualizing learning so that you can learn what you need to be successful in your job and successful in your career has been an absolute unbelievable freedom for our people. And we wouldn't have learned it without the paradigm of, very ironically, an extraordinarily difficult situation of the pandemic. We also took the opportunity to smash some other paradigms that I can talk about later. But that one, the ability to use technology so that you can learn what you need to learn. And then the second part of it, then I will shut up, sorry, is make sure your company has great internal mobility. So we had pretty rubbish internal mobility. Our people couldn't find the vacancies. They couldn't apply for them. They had to go outside to our website to come back in. And we said, and they told us through our survey, that's pretty poor. Well, we've got 2,500 vacancies this year, right? So I had to make sure that our internal mobility processes were good for our employees so they could go and learn and then they could go and grow. And I'm really pleased with what we've done. Of course, there's still more to learn, but it's great to set the individual free on their own learning paths.
I'm curious, how did you do that? How did you make the internal roles more transparent, and what really worked, or what did people really resonate with?
Honestly, it's all about the technology. I mean, the technological revolution we're in at the moment enables so much. We're working at the moment on, we're not there, but we're working on the moment on, Lauren goes in and types, hey, I really want to do this, and this is what I think I'm great at. We're working on popping up some internal mobility suggestions to you. Now, we're not there, but if the technology is there for people to be able to go in and see, I'm this is the capabilities of what's needed for that. And by the way, we do allow promotion through our mobility. A lot of people don't, they only allow this, we allow this. Give it a go. And then, of course, the processes are normal. If it's a promotion, you've got to interview, you've got to go through the process because you've got to prove that you're good enough to do the job. But I honestly think all of this is tech enabled. And sometimes we're probably not as demanding. We've got a fantastic IT team here. We could be a little bit more demanding as a function of our IT teams.
I think that's fascinating and definitely something that, we've also seen at Power to Fly. So I'm selfishly asking some of these questions, but I think they ring true for a lot of organizations. And it really ties into this next piece, which is employee motivations. So as you said, people want to learn. That is so core to why people join companies. What are the educational opportunities they provide, the L&D opportunities. So how can we, as leaders, ensure that our employees are motivated in the way that they'd like, yet maintain a uniform approach? And obviously, what y'all are doing at Palo Alto Networks is amazing, but of course, not many of us have access to this technology or the resources that y'all do. So, maybe starting from like very small startups to the larger startups or enterprises, what can we do to motivate these employees?
There are tons and tons and tons of articles written about motivation. I honestly think, and forgive me because this is going to be an overly simplistic, or it's going to come across as an overly simplistic answer. It goes back to what I said earlier. My team are motivated if they believe I really care about them, and if they believe I'm supporting them, and if they believe I'm helping them. If they think I'm thwarting them, if they think I'm not giving them opportunities, if they think I'm not recognizing them for their work, they're not happy. And the one thing I would say to leaders time after time after time, look inward in your own heart. What motivates you will be very similar to what motivates people. You know, when you feel down at work, you feel down when you've not been recognized. You feel down when your boss hasn't seen the work and the effort. You feel down when you don't understand what you have to do, right? So there are so many surveys about what equals great motivation and great sentiment. And I don't care about any of them. I care about caring about every single individual, because I know that everybody I talk to, you know, every single counseling, every single mentoring, every single buddying over the last blooming 20 years is all about, I don't feel cared for. I don't feel valued. I don't feel like my manager really thinks about me. You know, the same themes just keep coming up. So you don't have to have flash technology. You have to know the people who work for you, and you have to know their limitations and their own concerns. And then you have to work with them to rectify and have them believe that you mean it. And by the way, if you don't, you can't fake it. You can't fake it. You know, your point earlier, Lauren, that I wasn't a good manager for 15 years. For 5 of those years, I only believed in myself. I just thought it was all about me. And for 10 years, I probably tried to fake it. That's the real truth. You know, that's the dirty truth about me, that for 5 years, I thought it's all about Liane. You know, I was an individual sales contributor for a while. So it was all about me. You got to believe it. You got to know, you've got to experience that if you care about your people, if you deeply care and you want the best for them, you'll be successful. It's a two-way win.
And how, I mean, I totally agree with you. And I think that basic human connection and caring is key, as you've stated multiple times. But how do we keep that uniformity? You know, I don't think there's any surprise in knowing that there are some bad eggs out there, or people who care more, care less. And, you know, if that is kind of the core factor of how do we motivate our employees? We have managers that care. How do we keep that uniform across departments, and especially in these larger organizations where, you know, there are multiple levels and a lot more employees to care about? How do we keep that core value, if you may, organization wide?
Okay, now this is where I get carrot and stick. So there's a few things you have to do. One, be super careful in your hiring. One thing I learned through working 10 years at Google is you hire for people's potential and their values. You don't necessarily hire for their expertise at this point in time. Yes, that's important, but hire for their values. And don't ever hire someone who you think could not be a supportive leader particularly. And make sure that you know how to question that. You know, I've sat in so many interviews where people just don't know how to interview. Make sure you know how to get to the heart of what is this person about? What do they value? What do they care about? Are they truly a team player? Do they truly support their teams? So one, make your hiring values-based, right? Other things are important, you know, expertise, yeah, you know, all that stuff, but values you can't change. Expertise you can. So potential and values, and never compromise. Like I learned at Google, never compromise a hire. The second thing is the stick. If at times you make a mistake and you hire somebody who is not supportive, not collaborative, they have to be, it has to hit them in their goals and milestones, their performance evaluation. It has to be discussed. They have to be told how to improve. Really, they do. Because nothing is more corrosive in an organization than bad behavior. You know, we all make mistakes, we all miss targets, we all get our numbers wrong. Bad behavior is corrosive, and it's enduring, and it hurts people. So I do get to the stick end, Lauren, and I do demand that in all of our goals and milestones, we have the how as well as the what, i.e. Liane's going to achieve, you know, whatever, but she's going to do it in this way. The other thing, one thing that we did that I would really recommend to any company, most companies have values, and I see them stuck on walls or T-shirts. I mean, nonsense. I lighted on something when I was at Uber I joined Uber at a period of deep crisis to try to help the crisis. And I learned something, I can't remember how we did it, but we suddenly made the decision that we've got to have values that the people care about. And we had a list of 14 values and nobody could recite them. And it not effective. So we decided to go out and crowdsource our values. We went to 17,000 people and said, what do you care about? What matters to you now that we're resetting the company? And I've done that again at Palo Alto Networks. I've involved every employee, given them the opportunity to be involved in crowdsourcing our values so that we can say together, this is what matters for us, not just the leadership team, but us as a group of people and a family. And I've found that when you do that, people safeguard those values, as we all should.
Fantastic. I love that. And two really incredible answers. So thank you so much, Liane. This next question is a bit controversial, at least in the conversations that I've had. maybe not so controversial, but values fit or culture fit. Some people love it, some people hate it. What is your opinion on, hiring? And I think you touched on it just a little bit, but hiring for values fit or culture fit, and why? And what does Palo Alto Networks believe in?
Oh, I think it's essential. I don't think it's controversial at all. As I've just said, I think it's the most important thing to interview for and to hire for. In fact, when I'm talking to leaders about leaders, I only get involved in recruiting at that level now, but I still get involved in recruiting. First question I ask them is, what's this person going to be like? Right? Give me the words. Give me the words. And then I have a conversation with the line manager, so that becomes a values-based conversation so that we can then hire to those values. I don't think it's controversial at all. I think you should never hire somebody that you think is not a good person, because it will come back to haunt you. We've all worked, I'm guessing, for people who are not as supportive of individuals as they could be. Why would we do that? So for me, it's unequivocal. You hire to people's value set. Now, that does not mean that everybody has to have exactly the same values, right? We've all got things that we value more than others, but you've got to make sure that those values are broadly in sync. So, we look, for example, big time for collaboration. It's a big time value for us, but we also look for execution. Are those people going to do what they said they're going to do, right? So, your values can be broad, and they should be. We really, really, interview for inclusion. And I think the best companies have a broad set of values, but I don't think it's controversial. I think it's unequivocal.
Fantastic. And actually, Pooja asked a great question in the chat too that kind of ties into this. In your rich experience, what was or is the biggest challenge of a chief people officer, and how do you view the new remote working landscape, or the new remote working given the changing landscape? How has that affected the work that you're doing and this process as a whole?
Honestly, I love remote working. We're like all in. So we have said categorically, we're a hybrid org. If people want to come into the office, they can come into the office. If people want to work from home, they can work from home. I personally, and this is controversial, this is very controversial, not me personally, this organization believes we give people choice, right? And some organizations, and this is the reason it's controversial, some organizations are saying post the pandemic, yes, you can work from home 2 days a week or whatever, and we want you to come in, blah. We don't. Unless you have to be in the office for very specific events or because of the nature of your job, we do not expect you to come into the office. And the reason is you have proved to us that you can be productive and you can be good people. If you want to come in though, absolutely, please do. And it's very interesting. We have seen as we've opened our offices gradually, the people that want to come in are often early in career, because those poor people have started new jobs and never gone into an office, never had that human touch. Some people need that human touch, others less so. Some people have situations in their working life, their home life, where they don't want to be in the office. Super cool. So I'm very adamant about this. We are going to be completely flex. The CEO is completely aligned. He's absolutely on board. He completely believes in this. I don't think it's controversial at all. And we have learned that it's a paradigm, as I said earlier, we should smash. You don't need to control. But here's the deal. This is predicated on agreed outcomes. I don't care whether you work at 6 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock at night and have the afternoon off. I don't give a damn. I don't care for the most part whether you sit in Texas or London. I don't give a damn. I care that you do what you said you were going to do, to the standard that you said you were going to do it, and in a way that is supportive of our values. And I believe organizations need to shift to those outputs rather than controlling the inputs. I don't need to control my people. I need to trust that they're going to do what they said they're going to do. If they don't, that's a different conversation. So as a chief people officer, I learn all the time, the more you let people choose, the better they are, because they value that choice, just as we do in our lives generally. And in terms of the biggest challenge I've had as a chief people officer, oh, blimey, there's loads. There's so many. I think the biggest, it's not so much a challenge, but the biggest question I face all the time is, when do you go for consistency? And when do you allow functions and individuals choice? So, I've told you really categorically that I believe in choice. I believe having choice around your learning, your benefits, your location. I really believe in that. What's the line on comp? When is that like, you can't have choice on comp? Well, actually, maybe you can have choice on the makeup of your comp, equity, pay, whatever, and that is challenging because people have very different perspectives, but it's a long answer, sorry, also an opportunity. When you see people with different perspectives and resistance, work with it. But, you can overcome most challenges if you want to do the right thing.
I love that. And I have so many follow-up questions, but I want to give the audience an opportunity. We have a little under 20 minutes left of this conversation, so feel free to submit your questions to Liane right now. And I do just want to echo something that Evelyn had said in the chat about culture fit. And they say the term culture fit can be tricky because at some point that becomes a bias introduced into the process in terms of diversity of thought. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I completely agree.
I would add. Yeah, I would add. My answer was very much more about values fit than culture fit, right? I agree with that statement. I think you've got to be careful going for culture fit, right? Because you might have a bad culture. Base it on values, not culture.
Totally.
Culture natural values.
Thank you, Evelyn. That was a good comment. Good question from Crystal. Crystal wants to know, she's a 4-month baby, and during a recent interview for a company in tech, when she was asked about her life, she was honest and she talked about having a baby. And after that, she was asked about the time she took for maternity leave and the months for the baby. She definitely felt that tone of the interview change. I was not asked to go on the 3rd round of interview, and she was wondering if her motherhood status was something that kept her from going forward. And how should one talk about yourself and the things that matter to you personally during the interview process? What are some of the do's and don'ts? And that's kind of where I wanted to take this interview next anyway, to talk about, advice for job seekers, especially navigating this crazy time between the great resignation, the great rehiring. We're in a pivotal moment in the world right now. So what advice do you have for Crystal? And then we'll talk about job seekers holistically.
Well, Crystal, if that was your experience, shame on the company you were interviewing with. End of. I don't know how many mothers there are on this call, but I'm a mother and I'm bloody proud of being a mother, and I'm proud of taking time out to be with my kids, right? I'm actually a grandmother very recently. And my boss has allowed me weeks out to be with my grandson, because he knows I'm going to do my blooming job. So shame on the company. I can't say any more than that. I just can't even countenance that could happen. I believe you entirely, but shame on the company. There's no room for that. In terms of do's and don'ts in interviews, again, it comes back a little bit to, what I would say in all discussions with anyone. Take some time to understand the person that's interviewing you and what's important to them. There is nothing worse. I interviewed someone very recently, and the person just kept on speaking. And I'm like, I asked you a question and I was literally there sitting there like after 7 minutes going, I don't even know what you're talking about anymore. I really think there's a few things actually. Let me step back. One thing, everybody who works for a company is representing the company when they interview. Do some research about the company and have a reason why you want to go there. It's very disheartening for an interviewer to hear, hey, you contacted me, I'm not really interested. Like we all go, hang on a sec, why would we bother with someone who doesn't really want to be here, but is playing that sort of card? So one, show you're interested in the company by doing some research and dropping that in the interview. You know, when I read about Palo Alto Networks doing this, I was amazed and surprised and delighted. That goes down so well because we all want to hear we're doing a good job, including those people who are interviewing. One thing that you might not think about. Second thing, get to know your interviewer, right? And find out just, don't ask him too many questions because it gets boring, but, do ask the question, what matters to you in this job pretty early on, because then you've got the information to work with your answer. Third thing I would say, there is never a downside in showing you're diligent. Ever. There is not an interviewer in this world that doesn't want to hire someone who gets stuff done. Never. And then the fourth thing I would say, be a little bit careful. You won't like this. You won't like this statement, I'm sure. Be a little bit careful about asking about career progression. Because if you're interviewing someone and one of the first questions they ask is, if I join Palo Alto Networks, what's my career progression going to be? The immediate response we could have is, gosh, they're not interested in this job. Now, we've all done it. And I think particularly, I say to my kids, again, who are early in career, don't do that, because the interviewer is interviewing for the job that they want you to do. And there's going to be something in their head that goes, oh my goodness, they might only do it for 6 months. So be very careful about the career development question, because it could trigger, gosh, they don't really want this. So in short, show you care about the company by doing a bit of research. Ask the interviewer what they want for this role. No downside ever in showing that you're diligent, you have stickability and resilience and grit. And be a little bit careful with the career development question. Show that you're excited about the company and the job. They would be the sort of like generic things that I would say. There's a ton more, but they're the generic answers.
It's great advice, and especially about the career progression, because I know a lot of people encourage you to ask that question, but I completely understand your perspective too. And I think that's super valuable to not kind of lead with that. Maybe
it's exactly that, Lauren. Clearly you want to know.
Yeah.
And maybe it's your third question, but it's not your first.
Exactly. I think that's brilliant advice. I have a few more questions. I'll try and get to as many as we can, but talking about virtual interviewing, I think that's really hard. I think it's hard for both the person who's interviewing and the interviewer. What advice do you have for kind of both parties? How do you put your best foot forward? And, as an interviewer, make sure you're showing the wonderful culture of your organization. And as the interviewee, how do you make sure you're putting that best foot forward?
I do think it's hard. However, before the pandemic, I was being deluged. That's an exaggeration. I was receiving the odd email here and there from companies who were selling virtual interviewing platforms, because it is costly to say to someone in London, hey, you've got to come to California for an interview, right? So this was going to happen because companies can save a ton of money if they do this, right? So it was going to happen. I'm less skeptical, honestly. My question to you is, as you watch Lauren on the screen, forget me, are you resonating with her? And, ask yourself, what does it take to resonate with someone on the screen? You can do it. So we know that a lot of communication is nonverbal, right? But it's still quite facial. It's still about the smile. It's still about the expression. It's still about the body. Like I'm doing this as I'm talking because I'm passionate, right? It's the use of the hands. So I think that we could overemphasize the downside of virtual, and it's probably not the right thing to do because it's here to stay. Even after the pandemic, I sort of think, it's going to be here to stay, whether it's learning, whether it's interviewing. And so my sense of it is if there's I mean, we now have on our screens in our offices, and we're trying to put it on the screens when people come in, hey, how to be considerate of your audience virtually. One of the things that I have noticed is giving people time and pausing a little more on Zoom. But I do think you can get your personality over. I do. I think you can still come across as who you are. And I think we just have to learn those skills. And honestly, the truth of life is, if we're really genuinely passionate and we're not going through the motions, usually that comes across. You can see me getting excited about choice, right? Because I'm passionate about it. So, you can get personality across on Zoom. And it's interesting, I was saying to someone the other day that I've joined a very small coalition of chief people officers. I've never met any of them in the face-to-face. Yeah, I'm starting to love them. I'm starting to really love those people. And that will happen virtually. So, over time you can get there. Interviewing clearly doesn't give you the time, but just try and project who you really are. That's all you can do.
I love it. It's crazy that we're all doing this now, which is amazing, and it just speaks to the rapid growth of technology. And I mean, we could dive in there even more, but we have more other questions to get to. So let's talk about quickly, since a lot of our audience members are young professionals, or as I mentioned, those mid-career pivoters, what advice would you give people who, one, maybe don't have enough experience in the particular industry that they're looking to get into, or two, have gaps in their work experience? The two big things that we get asked all the time, how do we combat this lack of experience, or how do we combat this resume gap?
I'm not sure you can. I think any company that expects someone who's early in career to be completely rounded and not have gaps is a bit balmy. And I think it's a little inauthentic to imagine that you're 6 years out of college and you've flown the world 17 times and understand every function. So I guess my advice is, don't be so blooming hard on yourselves, right? What you've got to do is show that you can excel in the experience that you have. And again, I did mention in passing that I've worked across lots of different functions, right? I started in teaching, then in sales and strategy and marketing and customer service and stuff. And, I find that if you're diligent and you get your work done to a high standard when you're in, and you're not always seeking promotion, opportunities come to you. So, in my career, it wasn't always that someone came knocking and said, hey, Liane, you can be, the next level up doing something different. It was, hey, Liane, you can move across and learn this other stuff. And I was super cool about moving across and learning some other stuff. It didn't matter to me at all whether it was called this title or that title. I just wanted to bloody learn. So I think you can fill gaps by moving laterally. Sheryl Sandberg talked about, this really sticks with me. She talks about careers not being a ladder. She talks about them being a jungle gym. Go that way, and then go that way, and then go that way, and then you'll go that way. And I really believe that. And I also believe those of you who want to run companies or be very senior, the more functions you can have had experience of, the better, right? The fact that I've worked in marketing and sales helps me understand what I do now with marketing and sales. So I would say, don't worry about your gaps. It's a bit of a balmy company that expects you to be rounded. I think in mid-career, take some risks. Take some risks. I say this all the blooming time. You don't, if you stay in if you're an HR grad, then you go, HR ops, HR blah, 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 blah. You've missed out on all of this knowledge out here. All this stuff you could have learned about business and companies and the way things work. So please don't fixate on this. Fixate on this, because I honestly believe it will make you more rounded and make your career more happy, because you'll just keep learning and growing. So don't beat yourself up because you can't fill all the gaps. Just be honest and accept that about yourselves. It's really cool and fine.
Which kind of brings up this other question that we get asked a lot at Power to Fly, and that is imposter syndrome. And almost every single conversation we get asked, how do we combat that? How do we get up the courage to grab that next jungle gym ring and take that leap of faith? And I'm wondering, have you ever felt imposter syndrome when taking these big jumps from marketing, sales, HR? You gave us the story earlier, but what advice do you have for people who are facing that right now and really unsure, is this what I want to do, or should I take this leap, or am I good enough for this promotion? Imposter syndrome is so real and rampant in our community.
Yeah, of course it is. And I don't think anyone doesn't feel it. So of course I have felt imposter syndrome all the blooming time. Even now, I sit in meetings and there's a whole load of numbers and acronyms and I think, oh my God, I haven't a bloody clue what they're even talking about, and I don't dare say, right? We feel imposter syndrome all the time. I remember when I was at Google, we did a survey around imposter syndrome, and I can't remember the actual numbers, so I might get this wrong, but it was something like 80% of it were feeling it like weekly. It's like normal because you're always with people that are smarter than you, that have more knowledge than you, and you're sitting there going, oh my goodness. So embrace it. It's fine. Everyone feels it. You get through it by knowing secretly everyone feels it. That's the secret source of the knowledge. It's not just me. It's all of us. And frankly, we've all felt it when we go into parties, or we go into bars, or we go into wherever we go. Like, we've all felt that insecurity across our totality. I feel it like sometimes being a mom, like, oh my gosh, I'm pretending to, right? We all feel it. It's like part of the human condition again. So embrace it. It's real. We all feel it. Don't beat yourself up. It's okay. I think the second thing, though, is that, because there was two parts to that question, how do you know whether you should move laterally? How do you know? You can't. How can you ever know anything for sure until you do it? How do you know you want to be a mom until you have kids, right? I mean, it's just nonsense to say, I know what the future is going to be. You can't know how you feel. The question is your risk tolerance. It's about you. And only you know the risks you are willing to take and what the pros and cons are. So what I say to everybody is, when you're considering that move, write the pros and cons, and then just make your own risk assessment for you. Maybe do it with your partner or your best friend or someone who knows you well, right? Not necessarily someone at work, but somebody who understands you. Talk it through with them. And then the next thing that I would say, which is probably the most important, whatever you do, do not look back. If you take that risk and you go into a different function or a different company or a different direction, or you have the baby, whatever it is, don't look back, because looking back equals pain. If you find yourself in a situation where it was, oh my goodness, I wish I hadn't, look forward, do two things. How do I make this situation the best it can be? And then look forward to the next one. Because time passes. Everything's a moment in time. I've had jobs where I've been, oh my God, what the hell have I done? It passes. It passes. It's a moment in time of a lifetime. So, don't beat yourself up. Don't look back. Don't focus on the negative. Just focus on the what's. So another point I would make. If you're working with someone that you don't respect, or team or boss or whatever, try and focus on the positives around that person. Because what actually happens is you get eaten up with the negativity. And if you can turn it to positivity, you do better. So if you take the risk, don't look back, but check out your own risk tolerance. Only you know that.
Such good advice. I could talk to you forever, Liane, but I have one more question for you, and then we'll tell everyone how they can follow you and follow up. But what advice do you have for our young HR professionals out there, or people who are interested in starting their career in HR, diving in? What should they do? How should they get started? Any and all advice you have for these people?
Yeah, I think, I told you I came to HR late, and I'll try and do this quickly. I now adore this function. I adore this function because it is the one function where you see the totality of the company. It is bloody fabulous for your brain. It really genuinely is. My advice would be, the recruiting route is good because there's always tons of jobs. There's always tons of jobs, particularly in the Valley, for recruiters, and you can be flex location. and you can make the move from recruiters into recruiting into HR. I think the most important thing in terms of an HR person is managing the IQ and the EQ balance. A lot of what I do is EQ, but a ton of what I do is IQ. And I think if you don't get that balance right, use the data, use the diagnostics, and use the EQ around it, you're not so good. But I honestly do think it's a great profession to go into. I now love it. And I would encourage people to, I personally don't think you need a background in HR. I mean, I'm a bit of a weird example because I was an HR like CPO before I'd ever done HR before. I'd never done it. I made some really terrible mistakes, by the way, but I'd never done it. So it's the sort of thing you can learn. Don't be put off by it. There's not a lot of stuff that you can't learn along the way. But if you're really trying to get into HR and you can't see routes, try recruiting. Try recruiting for an 18-month stint. You also learn a lot about business and recruiting. Okay.
Yay. So before we say goodbye, how can the audience follow up with you? How can they learn more from you, reach out to you, connect, any and all information?
Well, honestly, my LinkedIn profile, you can absolutely link with me on LinkedIn. And if any of you have specifics, I'm sure you can give the Flexwork Coalition website at the end, or indeed I'm fine with my personal email to a point. But yeah, I mean, it might take me a little while, but certainly I'm really happy for you to ask me stuff on LinkedIn, or of course.
Well, thank you so much, Liane. This has been incredible. I've learned so much. I think the audience has learned a ton too. There's a lot of questions we didn't get to, so I'm sorry we only had an hour, but as I said, I could have talked to you for so much longer, and just appreciate your time and speaking with our community. I think we all really, really appreciated this and needed this conversation to kick off our Wednesday.
So Lauren, thank you so much for the kind words. I can let my imposter syndrome melt away.
Yay!
Have a fantastic day.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.